On today's World Insight, no breakthrough after Monday's Ukraine-Russia talks ended, with negotiations set to resume in the coming days. What are the chances of diplomacy? And it's not just the conflict and the pandemic, but the existential threat of climate change we face today. A turn for the worse with deadly weather, warns the UN Climate Panel. What more can be done about it?
Hello, I'm Tian Wei, and this is World Insight. Monday negotiations between Russia and Ukraine ended. No breakthrough in the talks yet, says Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. Russia says both sides did agree to meet again in the next few days. Ahead of the meeting, Russian negotiators say they wanted to reach an agreement as soon as possible. For its part, the Ukrainian side said their main goal was an immediate ceasefire and the withdrawal of Russian troops. Meanwhile, more explosions were reported in major Ukrainian cities like Kharkiv and the capital city, Kyiv. It's reported more than 500,000 refugees have fled the conflict, with more than half crossing into Poland. Russian forces have claimed that air superiority over Ukraine and say civilians can leave Kyiv freely. On the latest, I talked today with a panel of Russian and Chinese analysts. On the latest crisis in Ukraine, I'm joined in Moscow by Yuri Tavrovsky, professor at Russian People's Friendship University, and also in Beijing, Zhao Hai, assistant research fellow at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. We've been trying to reach out to have also a Ukrainian guest being featured on our program. At this moment, we're still having some difficulties. But let me start by asking you, Professor Tavrovsky from Russia, what do you make of the results of this first round of discussions?
Well, those discussions were pretty low-level discussions, both on the Russian side and Ukrainian side. But it is very optimistic that they took place, and that after the first round, they decided to continue and meet again, and maybe the level of discussions will be higher next time. So I'm quite satisfied. Head of Russian delegation, Mr. Medinsky, is an aide to President Putin, but he is a specialist on history. He's chairman of the Russian Military History Society, and it's the first time that he appears on the diplomatic front. And other members of the Russian delegation are also, let's say, non-professionals. The same is true with the Ukrainian delegation. There are no people close to Ukrainian president. So it was, and Ukrainians even stressed their unofficial position. The way they dressed, they didn't wear any formal jackets or something, just T-shirts. So it's good that the meeting took place, and let's hope that the development of events on the battlefronts will make both sides to be more serious next time.
I think I agree with the professor that the very fact the negotiations started is a good sign that at least both sides now having the willingness to sit down and talk about possible political solution to the current war. And however, the dressing that the professor mentioned is because I think the Ukrainians wanted to show to the world that now they're under attack. And, because their president himself is not dressed in a formal attire. So I think that's why they also dressed in T-shirts. But that didn't mean that this talk is not serious, and it's important because it has global impact. And we're looking forward to the second round of the talk. At least from the first round, it's not, the talk did not break up. So that's the good sign. However, the bad sign is that so far there's no concrete common ground between the two sides. We need more closer positions on both sides so that we can close this conflict as soon as possible.
Latest reports also suggest, Professor Tavrovsky, that Russia has been sending more heavy artilleries as well as more military presence into the capital of Kyiv. It seems that there are very clear messages being made by Moscow. On the one hand, there's going to be an ever-escalating military pressure. On the other hand, there is the negotiation table. Is that the message?
Yes. By starting this operation, we were already sending a message that we have certain demands, we have certain conditions, and we have power enough and political will enough to hear our conditions well. So I think during those negotiations, our cards were put on the table, and now the Ukrainians are studying it, and I hope that by putting more pressure on Kyiv, we are becoming closer to a decision of this problem. Because, any war ends in peace. Any war ends in negotiations. So I'm very hopeful.
Professor Zhao, let me also go to you. How do you see the potential of escalation of tensions, and what could that mean in terms of challenge for the international community to come to consensus about what to do, how to address history, and how to address the future?
Well, that's a very complicated question. It's hard to answer at this point. First of all, I think the escalation, the possibility of this escalation is huge, because right now both sides don't want to back down. The Russian side has asked for 3 conditions to be met, by the negotiation, and they're willing to use more force to bend the will of the Kyiv and the current Zelensky government. And right now, Zelensky government, with the support of the West and international community, particularly the severe financial sanctions from the West, wanted to continue to fight and resist Russian pressure and do not yield to any of the requests from Russia. So right now, I think it's hard to find a common ground before, I think, the further escalation and the result of the next round of military conflict. And the international community must hold on for probably more refugees coming out of Ukraine, and probably more troubles in the global market and the disruption of some of the supplies coming out of the Ukraine and Russia. So right now, I think we have to wait and see the results of the effort on peaceful resolution.
One of the things Professor Tavrovsky and Professor Zhao, many have been watching, is how the two sides are trying to handle the latest conflict to their advantage. Now, to the Ukrainian side, many have noticed, Professor Tavrovsky, that Ukraine has made a very fast, in a hurry, application to join the EU. Well, the EU, some officials have been suggesting it is possible. However, timeline is not being mentioned. If that is being done, would that be exactly against the original reasons, as Russia states, to take so-called special military actions?
Well, I don't know all the reasons that Putin had in his head when he decided to start this operation. And if, first of all, I doubt that EU will admit Ukraine, because Ukraine now is in a state of war and it has territorial problems, which is against the charter of the United Europe. But even if this decision will be taken, it won't affect the Russian strategic plan, I believe.
Professor Zhao, how do you see all these parallel development? Things are developing very fast, one have to say.
Yeah, let's just say that even if Ukraine were to join EU, there are EU members that are not NATO members. Remember that. I think it's very important that NATO is an obsolete Cold War military organization that shouldn't exist after the end of the Cold War. And right now, because Ukraine wanted to join NATO, and that sort of provoked Russian attack. So at this point, Ukraine's neutrality and some form of neutrality between Russia and NATO is essential to protect the peace and stability in that nation. So I think all the parties need to move towards that goal, trying to make sure that Ukraine is not part of the conflict and no longer be a battleground for the surrounding countries.
The other thing many also wants to ask is, what about China's position, Mr. Zhao? There are a lot in the world who are asking, where is China standing right now? The Chinese Foreign Ministry, of course, have been making remarks, and also Chinese president spoke on the phone to the Russian president. Very clear logic in the readout afterwards. How do you see where China is standing right now as things develop?
I think if you read Foreign Minister Wang Yi's 5 points, it's very clear China's position, which is that we want a politically negotiated settlement and stop this war. And we believe that UN Charter and international law should be upheld. At the same time, in order to restore peace, European countries need to sit down together to find an effective solution for the current situation. That solution needs to be balanced and needs to be sustainable, which means that the solution must be neutral and all the parties will have an interest, a skin in it. And that's why I think the world, including the United States and European countries, needs to respect Russia's security concerns on the one hand, and Russia needs to respect the sovereignty of Ukraine on the other. And without a political solution, only a military solution cannot sustain and will not win the day.
Professor Zhao, do you think what kind of role China will play, though, in order to make that happen?
On the one hand, China is a permanent UN Security Council member. We'll work hard from the UN perspective and gathering countries to support peace process and political settlement. On the other hand, China will busy doing diplomatic work, trying to bridge both sides, including Western countries and Russia and Ukraine together, and push them to sit down and find a common ground and find a solution as soon as possible. China now is in a unique position because we're neutral, because we want peace and development for both sides. That's why I think China is in a unique position to help those countries to come together.
Professor Zhao Long and Professor Tavrovsky, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.